There's 67 people registered.
I
Good
know.
morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Bad Boss with Anya Soto. I created this LinkedIn live show because I feel like there's so many bad bosses in the world and there's so many great bosses in the world. And as we do our consulting work, I hear it all the time. I want to stay because of my boss. I love my boss. Or the opposite. I hate my boss. I don't want to be here. So I'm here today with a dear friend and a colleague, Rashonda. We met, I want to say 3, 4 years ago. We were on a panel together for the National Council of University Research Administration and Cura. And we kind of followed each other's journey. And I love how we would like reach out throughout the pandemic and be like, what's going on? What are you seeing in the world? So that was really cool and awesome. So thank you so much for joining me today. I can't wait to dive into like, what are you seeing in the world?
I'm so excited to be here, Anya. Thanks for having me, and I can't wait to just dish it out.
Yes, and I know you're not gonna hold anything back. So anyone
No.
who is watching live, please say hello, put it in the comments, put your questions in, and yeah, let's dive in. I first wanted to say that you have three positions at a moment where you are an AVP at Penn State University, you're faculty at Johns Hopkins, and you own Purple Ship Consulting. So the other two are kind of like self-explanatory and like, wow, good for you, and like love witnessing your journey in your own leadership. Tell me a little bit of what is the focus or Purple Sheep Consulting and how did that come to be?
So I've actually been consulting for many, many years, but I just was a team of one. And during the July of last year, I went to Baylor because I'm also a doctoral student. And I was doing a mock defending of my thesis, and I was told that, I had a great idea and I should capitalize on it. And so that conversation led to another with a friend, and that came about with Purple Sheep Consulting. And so Purple Sheep Consulting is a small business where we focus on helping research administrators in higher education, but we also have a primary focus on mentoring, DEI, coaching, training, and education.
Mhm.
Mentoring is something that's dear to my heart because as a Black woman who has come up in research administration, I did not have a mentor, and I know the importance of how valuable a mentor can be because mentorships
Mhm.
can turn into friendships and eventually sponsorships that lead to other opportunities. So that
Yeah.
is a pretty much focus of Purple Sheep Consulting.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. And I can't wait to collaborate on some projects. I am fascinated by this. And I remember I heard it for the first time maybe 6 years ago when someone said, here's the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. Mentorship is, I've done it. Let me show you all the shortcuts and introductions. Sponsorship is bringing up your name when you're not in the room. And I thought that was so cool where someone brought up your name and said, hey, I guarantee like this person is amazing. I want you to bring them on. And I was like, well, is that kind of your interpretation of the difference?
Absolutely, but I'll give you one further is that mentorship is a two-way street. There's not been any person that I've ever mentored that I didn't also learn from. A lot of people go into mentorship thinking that, oh, I'm here to learn from you without understanding that others will also learn from them. So I think
Yeah.
first and foremost, that's the premise that it should be built on that foundation. And then
Mhm.
definitely sponsorship and advocacy as well. Because even though I may sponsor you and help you get a new opportunity, I may even create an opportunity for you, but I can
Wow.
also be a sponsor and support you in other ways, like on, for professional development, going on to
Yeah.
opportunities and exploring it where you may not be otherwise able to do so.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that's the kind of assumption. A lot of people are shy about asking someone to mentor them because they feel like they can't give anything in return. They're like, I don't have anything. But it's like to spin that, they can create an opportunity for you.
Yes,
Like as a
absolutely.
mentor, sometimes they can bring you inside their organization by being so I love the idea of like give and receive and believing and knowing that there's always something we can give each other, like the
Absolutely.
perspective, the experience and introduction. Everybody has value. So let's get into the nitty gritty of like tell me what makes someone a bad boss. And I know you worked for many organizations when you were like, this is a bad boss.
I've definitely had my fair share of bad bosses, but I also will So I've had a few good ones that have really helped me to develop into who I am. But you know what? I think what makes a bad boss is someone who doesn't realize that you need to pour into your people for them to pour into you. And what I mean by that is that, when we had the pandemic, one of the first things that I changed about my narrative in terms of leadership was when I checked in on my employees, rather than asking, how's the work coming? I asked, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Not about the work. It's about the people. If you take care of your people will take care of you in return. And so I think that's the foundation of a good boss when
Yeah.
they do that. And a bad boss is one who is focused on the bottom line only, not empathetic, lacks emotional intelligence, and also just lacks the awareness of how to understand what's happening with those that they lead.
Yeah.
Sometimes people have behaviors, and if we're not mindful and aware, we can miss certain cues that are important.
Yeah. And I feel sad almost. So one of the expertise of civility partners is working with bullies and turning around hostile workplaces. So in working with bullies and coaching bullies who were right bullies, all I see is like this high performer who is so wanting results that he forgets about the people. But it's like they're not bad people. They're just so like they have this narrative of like serving the business, and they think they're serving their people by like pushing them to get these results, and that lack of emotional intelligence that you talked about. It's like I see them being unaware. And I like to say they're not bad people. They're just so stuck on like results, results, results that they forget about their people.
Well, I'll do you one better. I'll challenge you to say that I'm not saying they're bad people, but as a leader, one of your qualities is to be aware. You
Yeah.
need to be aware of what's going on with those you lead around you in your area, your field, your focus. And, that may be something that we can use as a narrative for newer leaders where they're not as aware. But when you've been a seasoned leader in the field and you are still lacking emotional intelligence or awareness and focusing only on the bottom line, you're not a good leader.
I actually think it's almost like the leaders who have been in it for 30 years, their narrative has been as like, leave your personal life at home. I don't care about the emotions. You're here. It's actually the older leaders who need our help. They are the ones. I feel like the younger leaders actually have emotional intelligence, and they have been raised by parents who had more emotional intelligence than the previous generation. With you, like, is that what you were seeing? It's
I,
actually,
I do, especially with Generation Z. They're very empathetic, super aware, very focused on social justice,
yeah,
which is important. And I do believe that the older leaders, they come from a generation where, there was a separation between work and home. Whereas some people now realize that there's really a blurred line and it's really hard to have that separation. And so overflow is inevitable, but how you balance it with discipline is important. Many of us are working from home, working remotely. And when you're working remotely, you got that shorter window of commuting to your office in just a few steps, and also logging out at the end of the day in just a few steps. But what happens is we sit down, we stay there for long periods of time, and we forget that we need to unplug and create a balance for ourselves. And so I would say definitely the older generation needs that, and the younger generation is getting it right in a sense. But I also want to say that there's a change happening, right? There's a shift, and the shift is
yeah,
happening where right now we're seeing the workforce become something very different than it has been in the past. For example, I'm an assistant vice president for research at Penn State University, which is located in Pennsylvania. However, I live in Georgia. I'm in Metro Atlanta and Kennesaw. So, I
yeah,
mean, that's the beauty of one of the things that the pandemic taught us is that you can do your work from just about anywhere. And you see a lot of openings in places where they've tried to get people to return to the office. And so that right there is one of those, I believe it's going to be like the Blockbuster and the DVD rentals where it's going to be, antiquated, where you're not going to see it as much because there's, a shift of people who are preferring to
yeah,
work remotely. And don't get me wrong, I don't ever think that there will be a full remote workforce because some things are people facing, and
yeah.
people facing needs to be in person to do that. But if we worked primarily almost 2 years remotely, and you can't have a good reason why we need to be back in the office, then don't bring them back to the office. Save
Yeah.
yourself the time for recruiting.
Yeah, and I look at you, right? It's like you, like, why? You have access to this phenomenal talent. Why limit yourself to geographic location where you can tap into this diverse, amazing experience, knowledgeable talent anywhere in a country or in the world, right? And I think what's happening now when people do come together, it's more intentional.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a good thing because, don't get me wrong, I love when I have meetings or conferences that are in person because I get to meet up
Yeah.
with my friends and I get to see them in person, and nothing beats in person, of
No.
course. But understanding that we can get to the same goal with more than one pathway is important as well.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of all people are also appreciating the reduced commute, reduced expenses. I know every like today I have on a dress because I don't mind putting on a dress for you because I like
Oh,
to
yeah.
come, sit here and be in my purple. But most days I have on a nice top and some leggings
Yeah.
because that's the new work outfit, because you don't need to be fully professionalized because you're
Yeah.
only sitting from the top up. But I
Well,
also
let's
think
talk a little bit about, like, let's bring a lens of equity, right? When we're talking
Mhm.
about reduced commute, reduced expenses, not just expenses on transportation, but even expenses on, let's say, clothing. How much
Yes.
money we used to spend on like clothes because when you're in the office. So tell me a little bit, because I know you're such a huge advocate of diversity, inclusion, equity. What do you see changed with the remote work in terms of like equitable workplaces?
Well, I think that what you'll see is when you have fully remote, you mentioned this earlier, you're getting access to candidates you might not have gotten access to otherwise. Predominantly, it's geographically based because some institutions where they're located is not a desirable location where people want to relocate to,
Or affordable?
or affordable as well. Absolutely. But then you see also the other side of remote work is parenting, right? If you're a parent of young kids and you have to have daycare, you could save a lot of money on daycare as well. So that's an equitable thing that you can get within it. But I think the most equitable thing that I've seen, or diverse thing that I've seen, is the candidate pool. Getting access to people you would not have otherwise if it weren't remote. And then I
Yeah.
also see a lot of people struggling for recruiting top level positions because they are limited because of their location. So they're
They
trying to
are.
do a
I
mix
can
of,
work anywhere. Why would I choose you? Then give me a reason, right? Give me a reason. Why would I work for you? That's where we go back to employer brand.
yeah, absolutely.
Are
And
you
also
an
it's a employee market, not the employer, because the employees have the upper hand by looking at what they want versus what the employer needs. And you'll see more employers shifting to allow remote work unless it's necessary to be in front of students or people facing.
Yeah, and going back to those bad bosses, like again, I coach some and I see how like that's the only thing they know. That's the only way they know to manage and control by people being in the office. And I keep thinking like you're the next blockbuster. You will become obsolete. Like this is not the reality. Yes, that's how we've done it for 30 years, and that's not a reality. And I am personally so happy that that's not a reality. And I also feel like we got so on my side. It used to be just in person training, and then we moved to all virtual because we had no choice. And then last week, to your comment about the value of in person, I went to New York City and I was doing a workshop for Rockefeller Foundation, their communication team, and they also came together for the first time in many months and months and months. They moved to a new location. It's a new office. It's a little bit like change team, and just watching them come together as human beings and connect and collaborate and make jokes and laugh. There's nothing like that. So I'm curious, have you witnessed in your own life where someone was a boss, a leader who was unaware, lacked emotional intelligence, was very concentrated on results, actually shift, change, and transform?
So you're asking if the shift or transformation I've seen from a person
Like,
who lacked the
yeah,
emotional intelligence.
yeah,
Yeah, sure. I will say I've seen it where sometimes what makes us a bad boss is by not regulating the employees who are bad employees too,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they can shift the environment. I think one of the most recent ones you and I kind of had in common. We talked about this where I came to you and we talked about some of the issues that I was facing, and we talked about
Yeah.
the environment. So I would say, as a bad boss, the environment that you create can also shift. And what happens as a result of that? You'll see constant turnover. You'll see a lot of um, burnout from your employees, and you'll also see a lack of morale in the office, because who's going to? How can you be positive or excited if you're seeing people who are allowed to misbehave without any I don't want to say consequences, because I
Yeah.
hate being punitive, but when you're seeing people just able to do things while others can't, and you want to feel that there is equity and ownership, right, and holding people accountable. And that's emotional intelligence as well, because sometimes the optics of a situation can be more detrimental than what's actually going on, because I see one thing, I hear you saying another, but I see something different. And so
Yeah.
the transformation that you see in that workplace is you're going to see hardly anyone there. There are some workplaces who've been completely emptied out because of leaders who lack the awareness and emotional intelligence to, prompt change or to really listen to what their employees are saying. And if you can't hear your employees and they're quiet, that's even worse.
I know, right? It's like everybody smiles, everyone is good. I know sometimes we have been accused of opening a Pandora box. Well, your training, you came and gave space to people to say, and now everyone is talking about lack of work-life balance. And I'm like, so you think they didn't talk about it before, right? They talked about it. They just didn't talk to you about it. But it's like, yeah. I also love the environment that you touch upon. As I said, we can work with leaders and change leader, but then we're placing leaders in that same environment, like the system. How does the system change? And what you said is really like impactful. It's like, what is allowed? When we see bad behavior, where we see toxic behavior, where we see lying, gossiping, favoritism, it has been allowed.
Yeah.
And behavior just gets worse. It never goes from like, nothing pleasant person to like being a bully. It's like little jokes, little comments, little eye roll. And over time, it's like with violent, right? Behavior just gets worse and worse and worse. So if you were to give, and I know you personally have faced an environment where you inherited a team, like you did not create that team, you walked in and inherited a team that had some challenges. So now looking back, and if you could give an advice to someone who's coming in full of dreams and good intentions and has that systemically right set up a team that maybe is not high performers, what advice would you give them, or what advice would you give yourself like 2 years ago? And you think you look back now in retrospect and like, ah, damn, like that was, I wish I did this.
I actually have no regrets, and I'll tell you why. Sometimes when we come into a situation, we are not able to see things transparently, right? There are always things that are hidden that we can't ever fathom or understand until we're in it, right? And so that's inevitable. You can't do anything about that. But once you're there, you have to do a honest, transparent assessment of the environment and the resources and the support that you have. And so that means, one, are they willing to change? Or is this something that I can do, and what's the time frame that I can do it in? And if realistically you know that it's not going to have the time, it's not going to take the time that you're willing to commit, the best thing you can do is remove yourself from that situation,
Mm,
and understand. And it also is important too with that time constraint isn't the only variable, it's the support that you have from leaders above you. And if you have leaders who are committed to holding everyone accountable and reinforcing what you're trying to change, then you would have a easier time, and perhaps you could stay committed to that situation. But when you are in a situation where leadership is not supportive of the change, and the environment is one where it's resistant to change as well, then there's nothing that you can do because you're the only one wanting change. And so
yeah.
in that case, that's what the pandemic has also taught us, and it's given us the affordability to say, you know what, there's so many opportunities out there. Let me explore them and find something that is more suitable for me and my skill
Yeah.
set.
And I think that's leadership, right? It's like what's serving me and what's serving the people and what's serving organization, and having that kind of multidimensional experience that it's like maybe the organization is not ready for me. They said they were, and I see it all the time. They're like, we want you, we want change. And then you start creating change. They're like, no, 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 not like that. Not that
Oh,
fast. Not
or
that
it's too fast. It's too fast. It's too fast.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Slow
It's too
down.
fast. I like so one tangible maybe because I'm always like I'm looking at the time. We're 20 minutes in, and I like to keep this short. But
Mhm.
a tangible, if someone, let me see what I want to ask. How do you identify if you have the leadership support and resources like quickly? Because I think that's the hard piece. They say they are, but it's like, what's the when you're like, ooh, like, do I or do I not?
Well, the way that you do that is, you put the action into play, and you ask for their support, and it's very simple. For example, there are some employees who have been at institutions for many, many years, and they've in essence failed up. They failed up in the sense that no one else was left there to do the job. They really couldn't go anywhere because they're really a bad employee, but you promoted them because they were there. And some people see that as loyalty, and I'm going to reward them because they stayed around. Well, they stayed around because they couldn't go anywhere, right? So, in a sense of, as an example, trying to deal with that employee and say, you know what, I've noticed employee A has this demeanor, or even one of the things you said, the eye rolling, the little comments. As a person and a leader who is DEI focused, microaggressions come in those forms of those little snide remarks and sarcastic sayings that could be really offensive. Having that leader, go and say, hey, this is something we're not going to tolerate, or say, they didn't really mean anything by it, shows their support right off the bat. And
Yeah.
it's not even anything huge, it's something simple. If they don't support you in small things, they definitely won't support you in bigger
Oh,
things.
I love it. I love this so much. Yeah, it's so true. It's like so simple, but those are the things. Do you have a leader who's going to deny, defend, and say, no, that's not what they meant. No, they're really good. That's not really what's happening. Or would your leader believe you and say, I believe you. If you tell me this is what you're seeing, let's take action.
Absolutely.
Like it's
Absolutely.
so simple but profound. Well, thank you so much. I'm like, I wish we had like 5 hours to chat about you, and maybe we can do another episode. But I love your experience specifically with academia because anytime we work with government institutions or academia, we see way more toxicity just because it's often unionized. It's really hard to get rid of people who are toxic. And it's like people are used to it being this way. So I love the work that Black Sheep Consulting is doing, coming in and saying, this is not okay. And it doesn't have to be this way, right? We can change it. We can create like the transformation. So Derek just said, hey, very good point on nonverbal communication. And there's Geraldine is giving you indeed advice. So thank you guys. I'm sure people will have more questions. I'll make sure to tag Rashonda into the LinkedIn Live to share with you what we talked about today. And feel free to ask some questions. Feel free to reach out to her, to me. This is where we're so aligned on like changing work environment, just changing
Absolutely.
and saying this is not okay, we're not going to tolerate it anymore. And that's what I love about the current employee activism of being like, no, you either change or I'm out, and I'm all
Absolutely.
about it.
Because
So
employers need to realize that the employees are their value, and they're the ones who keep everything going. And so, thank you for having me, Anya. This has been great. Be sure to go follow Purple Sheep Consulting. We're on all platforms. And I love to join you again in the future.
yeah, sounds good. Thank you. Enjoy, guys. Enjoy your day. There are a lot of thank yous in the comments.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.